This is a sad one. I love talking about what's going well. I love talking about solutions, and we'll dig into a little bit of that today. However, it's a really sad day. Yesterday, Charlie Kirk was murdered, and I've really found myself in tears a lot about this issue. And I didn't know Charlie. I've never met Charlie, but I really respected this man. No one did what Charlie did, at least no one that I know of. Charlie was seeking discourse wherever possible, in real life, face to face, respectful discourse. And that's something that no one is doing. There's lots of keyboard warriors out there. There are lots of people hiding behind a screen. There are lots of news reporters, but there are very few people like Charlie who were willing to go out in the real world and take a microphone and hand it to people that disagreed with him. And he would sit there respectfully in debate with thousands of university students. And I think a lot of the vitriol or hatred towards Charlie, it's being done by those that actually never listened to these conversations in the first place. And maybe some people did and they disagreed with him. And you know what? That's fine. But no one deserves to be murdered, especially not Charlie Kirk. And I don't really know how to respond to that. I know what I should say. I know that the higher road today is to tell you guys that we need to unify and that we need to stop the tribalism. And I know that's the right answer, but I'm feeling something different because I have a different pile of evidence in front of me. Today, I want to dig into who really killed Charlie Kirk. Because Charlie, at the end of the day, died at the hands of one person, a demon possessed, mentally ill, horrible human being. This is true. One person killed Charlie Kirk. But I also believe that he was killed by something much bigger. And if we're serious here about truth and freedom and having an honest conversation in this country, we need to talk about who really killed him. Let's start by focusing on the individual person here, because this is something that as society we've lost our grasp on, the idea of the individual human versus painting entire groups of people with a paintbrush and saying everybody is one way. And that is always an argument for stupid people because that's never the case. You can't get giant groups of people together and have this homogenous soup. It's not actually a thing. Now, when something tragic like this happens, we rush to label and blame and again, paint entire groups of people with one brush. And that's really dangerous. And I'm not going to do that. And I try not to do that in my content. I will criticize politicians, liberal officials, policies, but I try very, very hard. I for sure have messed this up in the past, not to say all like liberals, for example, are one way, because I don't believe that to be true. In this scenario, one human being made a decision, one human being pulled a trigger, not a group of people, not an entire ideology. And if we lose sight of that, we will lose sight of justice. And worse, we're going to fuel even more division and violence. And that's the last thing that I want. We have to look at this through a mental health lens. I don't believe that we have a gun problem. I don't think that guns kill people. If you wanted to use that narrative, then we could also look at cars. Daniel Smith used this analogy the other day. It is a crime to use your car to kill someone. They don't then remove access to cars to all people. People kill people. A gun is a weapon. It also has other purposes, just like a car has other purposes. We have a people problem. We have a mental health problem. We have an ideology problem. We have some very scary ideologies out there right now. We have a mental health crisis that nobody wants to talk about because it doesn't fit into the neat little political narratives right now. And I've seen on X a lot people commenting about the school shootings and why that's not getting as much press. I do think school shootings get more press, but if we want to also talk about who the killers were of the last 8 school shootings, we can talk about that. I'm hesitant to even say who they were, but if we want to look at who is mentally unwell and doing a lot of those school shootings, that is also pointing fingers to a certain ideology. You know what? I'm not even going to go there because that's not the point. The point is there are people out there that are being poisoned by an ideology, by the media. We're going to talk about that a lot today. There are people abandoned by the system, and there are many, many people that are simply untreated with mental illness right now. That is the truth. At the end of the day, to break this down in its simplest form, a mentally unwell human being killed another human being. But let's dig a little deeper here, because Charlie wasn't just killed by a single individual. He was killed by a culture driven by media that has been manufactured for years, a culture that openly vilifies conservatives, Christians, and anyone who dares to question the mainstream media, the mainstream narrative. Maybe it was always this way, but I really feel like this started during COVID. And I shouldn't have said that word. YouTube's going to censor this. But people were always at odds with their political opinions. But COVID was the first time that I noticed, maybe it happened before, but it's the first time that I noticed that the media and our political officials took it to the point where they said, if someone disagrees with you on something like a vaccine, it is all right to wish death upon them. I'll never forget the front page of the Toronto Sun wishing death upon the unvaccinated. I'm going to play you some clips later. Now, any political ideology, any side, anybody can be guilty of doing this. Can it happen on the left and the right? Absolutely. But I'm going to play you some clips today that might rattle you because I believe it's happening more on one side. The fighting, the bickering, the name calling is happening on both sides, but the call to violence I see mostly happening on one side. And this is why I can't not make this conversation political. You don't hate the mainstream leftist media enough. And when I play these clips for you, you're going to know why. The ones who day after day normalize hate against people on the right. Notice it's never a conservative. It's never the right. It's always the far right. There's always mega in front of something. You know, I just did a story on Sean Foyt. It's not just Sean Foyt, the Christian singer. It's like the mega right hand of Trump. And I understand journalists want to sensationalize things, but come on. I don't hear the news ever, the mainstream news talking about the far left. Never. It's never a thing. And I hear them mocking anyone that disagrees with them, and I hear them encouraging violence in subtle and not so subtle ways. So I'm going to roll a thread of clips, and I want you to listen carefully. These are journalists and pundits, people with massive platforms, laughing about political violence, excusing it, or outright encouraging it. And while Charlie was trying to have respectful discourse, they were fueling the fire. Okay, let's start with the media's reaction to this. I'm going to start with some Canadian media. So this is CBC's reaction to hearing about the death of Charlie Kirk.
I mean, look, Charlie Kirk, and I don't say any of this to disparage him, but was a controversial, polarizing figure, right? The provocations that these university tours, he's going to these campuses, you know, to sort of provocation and confrontation and debate and argument was a big part of what he did with his Turning Point USA. But he was very close to Donald Trump, who has ordered all U.S. flags to be lowered in honor of Charlie Kirk for his murder today. You can see right there. Is that the White House? I think that's the White House. So this speaks to his importance and central role to Donald Trump. I mean, look, Charlie Kirk, and I don't say any of this to just.
Okay, so a human being just died. And CBC's first reaction is not to say, look at this horrible tragedy. A mother and two small children lost their father. Here's what he did well. Just immediately, here's all the things we didn't like about him. He was divisive. I love that they use the word provoke because that can be defined in different ways. There's provoke as in, you know, poke the bear and start a fight. Or there's this like rising up, which is what Charlie Kirk actually said that he was out to do. And if you listen to the man talk, he's like, I am here to provoke people, not in start an argument, because at the end of the day, he is a Christian. He has values of being a peacemaker. And you hear him talk about this a lot in other videos. But provoke, rise up, think about things differently, a very different terminology. Then the CBC had to highlight the fact that he had a connection to Trump. And instead of making it actually a really positive and beautiful thing, that the president of the United States would have all the American flags lowered at half mast in deep respect to this man that was a patriot, they turned it into a negative. See, he had connection to Donald Trump, and we hate Donald Trump. So we also hate Charlie Kirk. Do you see what they're doing? It's horrible.
Or so. What have you to this level of present to this level of
Okay, so CBC is bringing on a speaker here to focus on why the left is actually the victim here in this horrific murder.
risen to this level of violence in terms of lethal violence, but we've seen attacks here as well. I think it's such an important point to make, and I tried to do that this morning. We don't have the suspect. We don't know the full motivation, but it certainly is occurring at a very politically charged time. And you only need to go online to see the reaction from both sides to what has happened, to know what is spoken to there. I don't know if you've done that at all, Barb, in the last 12 hours or so. What have you seen there, and what concerns does that raise for you? Yeah, I've had a little bit of time to look, and it is very disconcerting what we're seeing, especially from from Trump and his supporters as well, where they are calling him a martyr. There are some in online spaces that are calling for further violence, retaliatory violence. So I really fear that this will lead actually to an escalation, as the left in particular is vilified in many of these narratives, and quite explicitly in an ex post comments by Trump from Trump yesterday, which really did put the blame fairly, soundly at the feet of the left and of liberals, and by extension Democrats as well.
So she wants to paint the left as a victim here in this scenario. It'll be interesting to see who the shooter actually is. I can't say I know at this point, but also referring to the rhetoric from Trump, who was also shot, by the way. Maybe we should be focusing more on the people doing the murdering and the shooting than the people that are feeling bad that they have they're getting bad press around it. Maybe we could focus more on who actually is doing all the murdering. That would be a good place to focus. Let's hear what Trump said about the situation.
To my great fellow Americans, I'm filled with grief and anger at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk on a college campus in Utah. Charlie inspired millions, and tonight, all who knew him and loved him are united in shock and horror. Charlie was a patriot who devoted his life to the cause of open debate and the country that he loved so much, the United States of America. He fought for liberty, democracy, justice, and the American people. He's a martyr for truth and freedom, and there's never been anyone who was so respected by youth. Charlie was also a man of deep, deep faith, and we take comfort in the knowledge that he is now at peace with God in heaven. Our prayers are with his wife, Erica, the two young, beloved children, and his entire family, who he loved more than anything in the world. We ask God to watch over them in this terrible hour of heartache and pain. This is a dark moment for America. Charlie Kirk traveled the nation, joyfully engaging with everyone interested in good faith debate. His mission was to bring young people into the political process, which he did better than anybody ever, to share his love of country and to spread the simple words of common sense. On campuses nationwide, he championed his ideas with courage, logic, humor, and grace. It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now.
So that's what CBC was mad about. They're saying that that's divisive. So, one, I want to say I think it's wonderful that the president of the United States, I don't care what you think about Trump. This is the president of the United States doing this video about Charlie Kirk. I think that's amazing. Like it or not, everything that Trump's saying in that video is correct. And this is what I'm really grappling with, not wanting to make this thing political, but what he's saying about the media is correct. Now, either side can get violent. Either side can get extremist. Now, CBC's mad that Trump is saying radical left. But he said not anyone that is on the left is radical. He's talking about a specific group of people. And what he said was, when you call people day in and day out Hitler, Nazis, fascists, that makes your listeners, the people that watch your content, that turns them into violent extremists. And also, you are a violent extremist when you're constantly using that language. Now, this is why CBC's mad, because that's what they do. The CBC constantly calls people on the right and Trump and anyone that supports him a fascist. Obviously, they don't even know the definition of that word, but they are radicalizing not the right, but the left. You see, when you brainwash people into thinking that their political opponent, people that disagree with them, are literal Nazis, you are giving them permission to do whatever it takes to take them down. And if this is you, if you have been calling people fascists, white supremacists, not, well, if we're actually battling Nazis and white supremacists, whatever it takes. You see, you cause literal violence when you do this. And this is not just one time. We're talking about Hollywood, all of mainstream media, and a lot of liberals, day in and day out, using this kind of language. This turns people into extremists, people who are already mentally unwell. This encourages violence. Now, I don't know why Canadians freak out so much about what's happening in the States and have the Trump derangement syndrome that they do. There was a U of T professor, University of Toronto, Brian Illy here pointed this out. So Canadian U of T professor Dr. Ruth Marshall praises the death of a good and honest man and adds to the violence by calling him a fascist cunt. She says, shooting is honestly too good for so many of you fascist cunts. I really hope this woman gets fired. This goes beyond just free speech, wishing death upon someone. This should not be allowed. This is a quote from Charlie Kirk himself. Assassination culture is spreading on the left. 48% of liberals say it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Elon Musk. 55% said the same about Donald Trump. In California, activists are naming ballot measures after Luigi Mangione. The left is being whipped into a violent frenzy. Any setback, whether losing an election or losing a court case, justifies a maximally violent response. This is the natural outgrowth of left-wing protest culture, tolerating violence and mayhem for years on end. And the cowardice of local prosecutors and school officials have turned the left into a ticking time bomb. Now, I heard CBC and people like Rachel Gilmore saying that they are worried about what might come from this from the right. And for sure, again, they're going to be extremists on the right. But what I've seen in abundance are people talking about how Charlie Kirk loved Jesus. Are people actually saying we need to unify? I'm seeing way more of that on the right. If this exact same scenario happened on the left, they'd be burning down buildings right now, protesting, looting, violence. And in fact, we already saw that. There was a vigil for Charlie Kirk. And allegedly, the leader of the BLM came and drove right through it and mass violence broke out. I don't want to make this political, but these are the things that are actually happening. Now, what really has my blood boiling is this is not really anything new. And again, this really kicked up in COVID, and politics is nasty. Both sides name call. But what I'm seeing is an abundance of data and people wanting free speech and discourse and truth on the right. And I'm seeing a lot of violence on the left, cancellation campaigns, murderous campaigns of people who dare try and speak the truth. Somehow, somewhere along the line, we made truth political. We made truth something that the right does and the left hates, and that's just wrong. I wanted to show you this montage of different mainstream leftist media outlets literally calling for violence.
I just don't know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be. People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator. You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives. Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
They go low. We can't.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and bring her neck?
They get my chin in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take you behind the gym and beat the hell out of them. Punch some people in the face.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
Look, as his character is stabbed to death. Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him? I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
A Missouri state senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
I will go and take Trump out tonight. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get right and you say a no.
And sadly, domestic enemies to our voting system and our honor and our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels. They're not going to let up, and they should not.
They say nothing yet.
You know, we even witness Biden not only calling his political opponent Trump names, but the people who supported him garbage. Garbage. You don't think that's going to radicalize people? Here is another super disturbing montage of MSNBC splicing together a video to make Trump look like Hitler.
But that jamboree happening right now, you see it there on your screen, in that place is particularly chilling because in 1939, more than 20,000 supporters of a different fascist leader, Adolf Hitler, packed the garden for a so-called pro-America rally, a rally where speakers voiced anti-Semitic rhetoric from a stage draped with Nazi banners. When a Jewish protester rushed the stage, the Associated Press reported, quote, instantly, a dozen or more stormtroopers set upon him, knocking him down and beating him as he held his head in his arms. Most of his clothing was torn from his body. Later, he was booked for disorderly conduct. Now, against that backdrop of history, Donald Trump, the man who has threatened to use the military against opponents he calls enemies from within, who has threatened to use the troops to quell what he says are lawless cities, and to use those troops to carry out mass deportations of immigrants, is once again turning Madison Square Garden into a staging ground for extremism.
MSNBC in the banner, pro-Nazi rally, while also thinking it was strange that he might bring in military to clean up crime in the streets. They actually want to keep the crime. They want to keep illegal immigrants committing the crime, but that's neither here nor there. Now, Canada, you're just as guilty. You're just as guilty, even worse sometimes, of vilifying people who disagree with you, attacking their character instead of their policies or their ideas. And this is the trend that we are seeing more on the left than the right.
Small.
Attack politics, divisive politics, negative, stirring up of hate and fear and differences. The dirty secret is they work. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. To be unacceptable was unacceptable and acceptable. Qui ne croient pas dans la science, qui sont souvent misogynes, souvent racistes aussi. C'est un petit groupe, mais qui prend de la place. The small fringe minority who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians. Et là, il faut faire un choix en tant que leader, en tant que pays. Est-ce qu'on tolère ces gens-là ou est-ce qu'on dit, ben, voyons.
So those, if you're just listening to the audio, those bits of French where Justin Trudeau is speaking, that's that scene where he's on a television show, a moment where I was actually fearful for my own life. I was. It was a dark time during COVID. They were building detention centers at this time. They were taking and splitting apart families when they disagreed about the vaccination. And Justin Trudeau went on TV And he said, if you don't want this vaccination, you're racist, you're a misogynist, you're a white supremacist. And then he said, how long will we tolerate these people? Which is a call for violence. It had me thinking that I needed to leave the country, that I wasn't actually safe, that my prime minister was calling people to violence, that he himself was about to commit violence. That is what that does to people. And that's what Canadian media has been doing to its own citizens for a very long time. You know, Justin Trudeau has also called Christine Anderson a far-right nationalist. She was too dangerous to bring to Canada. Very recently on CTV, they were calling conservatives racist for their crime of bringing up the conversation around immigration.
Extremely racist comments against immigrants, and we see it online. And what they're doing right now is race baiting, and I find it quite frankly offensive. What happens when you have a conservative leader who actually tells the truth and use facts, stats, and data to show you exactly how they got from point A to point B? Well, you get a full-blown absolute media meltdown. BBC tried to fact check things very poorly. So did CTV, but it's fine, guys. It's fine. You can scream and phobe all you want, but I got your back. I'm here to fact check you just to make.
I mean, Jasmine nails it. We have conservatives talking about policies and data points, and they're inarguable, so we get called racist, is exactly what happened. Now, there are a lot of videos that I'm not going to show you today because I don't believe that these people deserve any airtime. They deserve to have their accounts deleted forever, aren't capable of owning phones. They're not ready for the internet. And I'm talking about the people on X and TikTok and social media platforms filming themselves celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. I'm not even going to give it any airtime. I'm sure you guys have seen it. It doesn't deserve any airtime. It's horrible. And if this is you, go take your phone, go walk outside, go find a lake, and throw your phone to the bottom of the lake and never pick it up again. Because you have been radicalized. You are becoming hateful and violent, and you should not own a phone. Absolutely not. Instead of playing you those videos, I'd rather play you some videos of Charlie Kirk and who he really was and what he was actually here to do, because mainstream media will tell you that he is dangerous, that he was an extremist. But I saw something very different. You know, one of Charlie Kirk's main goals was to de-radicalize the population.
Political radicalism needs a catalyst. Political radicalism does not come out of peace, prosperity, rising wages, stable families, church attendance, and happy people. Happy people, grateful people do not get behind Vladimir Lenin, and they certainly don't get behind Chavez or Castro. That's right. Diminishing their own property or their dollars diminishing in value, they start to look for alternatives. And so the political project in front of us as conservatives should be, how do we actually de-radicalize the country in the next couple of years? That's my obsession. And that's why I say I try not to think about all this other stuff, because it just, it's so much brain space. My number one obsession is I know what is coming next. Political radicalism needs a.
Interesting idea, right? When people are happy, when they are healthy, when they're not mentally ill, when they're in stable relationships, when they have a stable job, they don't become radicalized. And maybe you have your tinfoil hat on and you see what I see too. It seems like these wacky policies that we are making in the West, why would they keep doing this? Why would they keep doing things that are so clearly hurting their own people, giving people endless amounts of drugs, not having a justice system that works, making people more and more poor every single day? Why would you keep doing that to your own people? Well, you can't have a political revolution if everyone's happy, which is a very Marxist idea, which is what we are seeing liberalism move towards more and more. And you have people that are outright communists and Marxists cheering on this idea. And you can't have a political revolution without radicalizing the people. And the people won't become radicalized until they are poor and unwell and unhappy. And I believe this is why we're doing the sick things that we are to our children. This is why we are creating policies that make us more and more poor, why we are opening up our borders and flooding our countries with more people than we could ever sustainably handle. Everything we're doing makes zero sense unless you understand that that's the whole point, The point is not prosperity for the people. The point is to radicalize them. I want to play this video here from one of his debate sessions.
It's usually a college campus against Charlie. I've noticed the swing of a college campus.
It's totally changed
now, and it's radically different, and it's so much more fun to watch. What do you attribute that to?
You know what it is? The people in this audience are smart, and they're panicking that they're not going to have a country. They're the first generation since George Washington to have it worse off than their parents. This generation is the most depressed, suicidal, anxious, drug addicted, lowest home ownership, poorest, most overweight, directionless. No, I mean, this is true. And also, this generation around you has something very unique. Almost everyone in this audience here had their prom canceled because of COVID, had their graduation ceremonies canceled, lost a friend to suicide because of all the lockdowns. And they are looking for a country that they can believe in, that they can live in. So I'm not going to take credit for it. These are forces greater than us. We just happen to be at the right place at the right time.
People stop talking, really bad stuff starts. When marriages stop talking, divorce happens. When civilization stops talking, civil war ensues. When you stop having a human connection with someone you disagree with, it becomes a lot easier to want to commit violence against that group. What we as a culture have to get back to is being able to have reasonable disagreement where violence is not an option.
Advice do you have for me as I move into adulthood in order to become a more informed and involved citizen?
Well, first of all, thank you for being here. And I have home things to people like you. How old are you again?
13.
13. Here's a couple things I want to encourage you to do. Learn something new every single day. And focus on what it means to be a good person and a person of strong character. Aristotle said that courage is the ultimate virtue. Without it, there are no other virtues. People are courageous. You don't have honesty. You don't have justice. You don't have beauty. You don't have wonder. So at age 13, I want you to commit yourself to a life of courage. Courage is doing the right thing when you don't know how it's going to work out. Courage is committing yourself to the correct course of action, regardless of the cost associated to it. Every human being, I believe, is made in the image of the divine, is sacred, is unique. And if we get away from this principle as we have, we not only have moral degradation, we not only have the collapsing society around us, but it's bad for that being itself. That being itself is unique. That being has rights. And who are we to say, just because we're older, that we get to murder it? Thank you.
Amen. You need to have a destination in your life. If you are on a date and a young lady says, well, what are you doing? And they're like, it's a kind of meander. And I go on DraftKings and I own crypto and I don't know. And loser, instead it should be, I'm studying this because of this. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to work for this person. I want to be able to make this much money by this period of time to provide for a family. I don't care how hard it gets, but I'll provide for you and provide for the kids. And I'll be the protector and the covering over the family. Follow me because I'm going to lead us. That's what they want to hear. They want the confidence and the security. That when life gets difficult and when life starts falling apart, that man will lead them towards security and stability. Because deep down, women have a very well-built and finely tuned, God-given instinct that they'll be able to tell in a man when the bullets start firing, is this guy going to protect me and protect my kids? And is he going to provide, or is he going to run for the hills? Go look to your grandfather's generation that stormed Normandy Beach, that built this nation, that started big businesses, that went on adventure. If the most important thing for you is just feeling good, you're going to end up miserable. But if the most important thing is doing good, you will end up purposeful. At the core of the left, at the core of a liberal, is someone that would use the sword if they had it. They are very violent people at their core. They always have it. They can't debate. They can't have conversation. So they'll resort to these tactics. They're going to do everything they possibly can to try to murder this movement because they can't beat us. So they're going to try to take weapons. And no, we're very aware of that. I'm aware of it. We have to have full-time security. This is not a joke. This is what these people are.
You a Christian?
Very, very much so.
Like, why is that exactly?
Jesus saved my life. I'm a sinner. Gave my life to Christ. Most important decision I ever made.
So you believe the Bible is real?
Yes, I believe the Bible is true and real.
Why is that?
Well, at Genesis 1:1, and the resurrection is true, anything in the Bible is possible. You're looking at the greatest miracle. The greatest miracle is creation. And then the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. I say, how do you know that Jesus rose from the dead? Well, show me another historical piece of a story where so many people willingly died a brutal death for a lie. Every single person around him had everything to lose, and yet they went to the absolute death, from Paul to Peter to the half-brother of James, saying that Jesus is Lord, Jesus rose from the dead. Not to mention, if you were going to fake a story, you would not use female witnesses in the ancient world.
In the scriptures, it said that the women were the first one to see Jesus Christ. If you're trying to fake a story, you would never do that.
Sorry, got a little emotional watching that. And there are so many videos of him debating. I know I'm going to be watching a lot of them in the next few weeks to come. He talked about a lot of things. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you agreed with him. You know, I've seen some people say, I didn't like the way he did it. What way? You mean respectful dialogue and debate and going out and meeting human beings face to face and not assassinating their character ever, but debating their ideas? You have a problem with that? That is something I'll never understand. And this is the way. And it's terrifying as someone in this space to think, is this dangerous to talk about truth? And, you know, you can go in with the intention to talk about ideas and to not attack your neighbor. And something like this might still happen to you. You know, are we at the place now where there is a fourth turning that's absolutely necessary? Have we hit this boiling point where there is no coming back? And I think this is one of those moments, an MLK moment here. I was just talking to a friend today about this. The difference is when events like this have happened in the past, immediately the conversation was, we got to get this under control and we need to unify. Media and their initial reaction to Charlie Kirk's death was, well, look how divisive he was. There was zero moment of self-reflection. There was zero moments of maybe we caused this. There was not a moment to say, this is terrible that this man died. We saw the complete opposite. We saw the continuing of the polarization, the continuing of the attacks, and the encouragement of violence. So who really killed Charlie Kirk? The man. And then who helped him? The media. And it's getting worse. All Charlie Kirk wanted was discourse. And you see, you're not actually a real liberal if you are trying to silence discourse, if you believe in censorship, if you believe in attacking the person instead of the policies. Those are not liberal values. And I know that as someone that was liberal my entire life, who still has those values. You don't actually want freedom and democracy if you support silencing dissent, if you support crushing your opponents, and certainly if you are cheering on the murder of an innocent human being. I'm going to leave you with one more clip here, because the thing that I keep seeing more than anything from mainstream media and from people on the left is, well, this was okay because he was a fascist. Let's look at a quick video here of what it actually means to be fascist, with the understanding that fascism happens on the left and the right.
I think that the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that; he's a libertarian. It always has been. Because how do we call a liberal? You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny. Well, there are some people calling you a scared in the White House. You wanted to win in Vietnam. You're against the Russians and the Chinese. You're a hardliner. You're fighting something. Well, that's very simple to explain. Not a hardliner. No one who is in my generation who's lived through 4 wars. Greatest immorality is for a government who asks its young men to fight and die for their country if it isn't a cause that country is willing to win.
Today's a very sad day. My hope is 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000 Charlie Kirks pop up in his place. And he was asked before he was shot, what do you want to be remembered? What do you want to be remembered for? And he said his faith. So while I see this political tension bubble, and while you might say by listening to this podcast, well, Carla, what you said here was divisive. What I want to highlight is this is not entire groups of people. This is not everyone thinks one way. But what is true and what is happening is mainstream media narratives are causing violence in our country, in the US, and everywhere abroad. And they set the tone. Our politicians, the media, They tell you how to act, and then the people act accordingly. I believe deep down in my soul, for example, that the things that happened in COVID, the way that people treated each other, how they canceled their friends and their family members, they never would have done that had the TV not told them to do it. But the TV did, and it told them that every single day. The newspapers did. I believe that mainstream media is the most dangerous thing to happen to us, that they can't be trusted, that they're done. So yes, a sick individual killed Charlie Kirk, but he was probably driven mad in the first place by the media, and they're continuing to do it right now. This episode is not your call to attack your neighbors and say, yes, see, I told you it was so-and-so. No, this is your pause to think critically, to continue to pursue the truth, to continue to be courageous, despite what may or may not happen to you, but to think a little harder about how you create content. I know I am making sure that I don't know. I want to talk about the things that are happening with courage. And I thought long and hard about making this episode because what I'm showing you here is divisive, but it's also what's happening. And maybe I feel like as a former liberal, I'm allowed to do it. You know, if you are someone on the left right now that believes in liberal values, the answer is you need to help stop the extremism on your side. Just like as someone on the right, you need to make sure that you are not adding to extremism on the right. And maybe that's the answer. You can be in your tribe, but you can't be an extremist. You can attack ideas, but you should never be attacking the person, especially when you take it to heights of calling someone a Nazi or a fascist. Know that you are causing violence, that you will be responsible one day for maybe causing the death of someone. That's actually where we're at. Keep debating. Keep talking about bad ideas. Keep bringing truth to light. But make sure you're debating ideas. You're not attacking the person. And violence is never okay. I'm going to leave you guys here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. This was a really hard couple of days. It has me thinking long and hard about what kind of content I want to create and how and what's the point and what helps people the most. And Charlie Kirk has me thinking a lot about my faith and how I can be more brave, especially when it comes down to doing this work in person, like he did. You know, while I watch angry keyboard warriors, I can't help but bring to mind Charlie sitting in a chair, taking a microphone, handing it to the person that disagreed with him, and him saying, "Let me hear what you have to say." That's something we could all do a lot more of. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. We are going through a huge evolution of the show, so I hope you will stay with me. New brand, new vibe, new guests, new purpose. In the meantime, if you like what we're doing here over on The Sovereign CEO, the best way to support this show is to leave us a 5-star review, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it today, someone who would like this. And if you feel so inclined, you can support my work over on Substack, where I share bonus content, behind the scenes, special newsletters only to people that are subscribed over there. You can also get all of your podcasts in one spot there as well. But thanks just for listening. Your support means everything. And I'll see you guys here for another episode soon.